Dr. Michael Harrington was known across Raleigh, North Carolina, as the man who never lost focus. In the trauma ward, under the bright lights and endless alarms, he carried a calm strength that made others believe miracles could happen. Yet, behind the white coat and steady hands, there was a man who longed for quiet, for warmth, for the comfort of home. For 2 weeks, Michael had been away at a medical conference in Chicago. The trip was meant to sharpen his skills and connect him with other surgeons. But his mind never truly left Raleigh. Even in the middle of lectures, he would find himself thinking about Emily, her laugh, the way she arranged fresh lilies on the kitchen counter, the warmth of her touch when he finally returned from late-night shifts. He missed her more than he cared to admit, and the city lights of Chicago only deepened his loneliness. On a sudden impulse, Michael changed his flight. He decided to come home 3 days earlier than planned. He pictured the surprise on Emily's face, imagined the smile that would light her eyes when he appeared at the front door carrying roses and a bottle of wine. For the first time in weeks, he felt excitement bubbling in his chest. But when he pulled into the driveway of their colonial home in Cary, something unsettled him. The street was quiet. The house looked the same. Yet a strange heaviness seemed to hang in the air. He turned the key, pushed open the door, and stepped inside. The first thing he noticed was silence, thick and uneasy, like the pause before a storm. Then his eyes caught details that didn't belong. The curtains were drawn, though Emily loved the morning light. The coffee table was cluttered, not with her usual neat stacks of magazines, but with an open whiskey bottle and 2 glasses, one still wet with melting ice. From deeper in the house came the faintest sound, music, a slow, haunting country tune that Emily never listened to. It drifted through the hallways like a ghost, each note pulling Michael forward, each step tightening the knot in his chest. He placed the roses on the counter, his hand trembling, his mind racing. Something was wrong. Something he could not yet name. And as the music grew louder, filling the silence of his home, Michael knew his return would not be the joyful surprise he had imagined. Michael walked back into his own house with flowers in hand, but instead of love, he found silence, whiskey, and a shadow waiting. If a home can change this fast, don't fool yourself into thinking yours is safe. Subscribe now before you end up blind to the danger in your own living room. And if you refuse, go to the comments and tell us why you'd rather keep the lights off than face the truth. Michael closed the front door gently, as though any louder sound might wake something hidden in the house. He placed the roses on the counter, his fingers brushing the petals without feeling their softness. He had planned a homecoming filled with warmth, laughter, and surprise. Instead, he stepped into an air that felt too heavy, too strange, as if the house itself wanted to keep a secret from him. At first, it was just a feeling, a small tug in his chest, a warning that whispered to him without words. But then his eyes noticed something so simple, so ordinary, yet so out of place it made his stomach tighten. By the door stood a pair of boots, not Emily's shoes, not the neat flats she wore to church, not the sneakers she slipped on when she went out for groceries. These were different. They were large, heavy, worn. Boots meant for walking through mud and gravel, not polished hardwood floors. Boots that belonged to a man. Michael bent down slowly. His hand reached out almost against his will and touched the edge of the leather. Warm. The kind of warmth that meant someone had only just taken them off. Whoever this man was, he was not gone. He was here. In the house. Michael pulled his hand back quickly, as though the leather burned him. His mind rushed through explanations. Maybe Emily had invited someone over, a neighbor, perhaps, or an old friend. But the boots told another story. These were not the shoes of a visitor sitting down for coffee. These were the shoes of someone who belonged. He straightened, his chest rising and falling in sharp breaths. That was when his eyes caught another detail, small but impossible to ignore. On the couch, against the cushion, sat a cap, a military cap. The green fabric was stiff, the brim worn at the edges, the emblem of the United States Army stitched at the front. Michael's throat tightened. He walked closer, picking it up with trembling fingers. The fabric smelled faintly of smoke, of dust, of faraway places. The cap carried weight, not just physical, but a history that clung to it like a shadow. Emily had no family in the Army. She had never kept such things in the house. So whose was it? He set the cap down carefully, as if by touching it too much he might invite its story into his own. His eyes darted across the room, searching for more clues, but what he found instead was silence. Not complete silence. Not the comfortable hush of a home at night. This silence was strange, thick, heavy, layered with the sense of something waiting. Then, through the silence came a sound. At first it was faint, almost swallowed by the walls. A voice, a woman's voice. Michael's heart skipped. Emily. He would know that voice anywhere. Even when muffled, even when low, it carried the softness he had loved from the moment they met. But there was something in her tone now, something he couldn't place. She was speaking, but her words were low, almost trembling, as if she was sharing something fragile. And then came another voice, a man's, deep, steady. Michael froze. The sound went through him like ice. The voice didn't belong here. It wasn't the cheerful chatter of a neighbor dropping by. It wasn't a call from the television or the radio. It was close. Too close. His chest began to ache as he struggled to breathe. Emily was not alone. He pressed himself against the wall, every muscle tense, his mind racing. Who was this man? Why was he in his house? Why was Emily speaking to him in such a quiet, secret way? Michael forced his feet to move. Step by step, he followed the sound, his body stiff with fear and anger. The floorboards beneath him creaked, and each small noise felt like thunder in his ears. He paused after every step, listening, making sure he hadn't been heard. The voices grew clearer. The air smelled faintly of polish and wood as he neared the room at the end of the hall, the music room. His stomach twisted. The music room had always been Emily's place of peace, her escape. She spent hours there, fingers gliding across the piano keys, filling the house with songs that reminded Michael of softer days. But tonight, the music was different. It wasn't light or joyful. It was slow, haunting. A country song, each note heavy with sadness. Michael reached the doorway. He pressed his hand against the frame, steadying himself, his fingers digging into the wood. He leaned forward and looked inside. The sight nearly crushed him. Emily sat at the piano, her shoulders slumped, her hands resting lightly on the keys. Her hair fell across her face as tears slipped down her cheeks. The lamp beside her cast a soft glow, making the wet trails on her skin shimmer like glass. But it wasn't Emily alone at the piano. A man sat beside her, close, too close. His hand covered hers gently, guiding her fingers across the keys. His head bent near hers, and his lips moved softly, speaking words Michael couldn't hear. Michael's breath stopped. The world around him blurred. His heart pounded so violently he feared it might break through his chest. And then his eyes locked on the man's face. The face was older now, leaner, marked by scars and shadows. But it was a face he knew, a face he had mourned, a face he had buried in his memory. It was Daniel, his brother, the brother he had lost 8 years ago, the brother the army had declared dead in Afghanistan. The brother whose empty coffin had been lowered into the ground as Michael stood by Emily's side, tears burning his eyes, alive, sitting in his home, holding Emily's hand. Michael staggered backward, his knees nearly giving way. He pressed his hand against the wall to keep from collapsing. His body shook, his skin clammy, his mouth dry as sand. Daniel, alive. It was impossible. And yet there he was, as real as the ground beneath Michael's feet. The questions came crashing into his mind, one after the other, too fast to answer. How was Daniel alive? Where had he been all these years? Why hadn't he told Michael? Why hadn't Emily told him? And why did they sit together like this? The room tilted as though the earth had shifted beneath him. His vision blurred, then cleared, only to blur again with the sting of tears he refused to let fall. He stared at Emily, his wife, the woman he had loved, the woman he had trusted. Her tears, her bent shoulders, her hand beneath Daniel's. It all spoke of something deeper than grief, something that had lived quietly in the shadows for years. Michael's heart broke, not just cracked, but shattered, each piece sharp, cutting him from the inside. The roses he had brought now seemed foolish, pathetic. The wine, a cruel joke. His surprise return, once filled with hope, had opened the door not to joy, but to betrayal. He pressed his forehead against the wall, trying to steady himself, but the storm inside him only grew louder. He remembered the day Daniel left for Afghanistan. The last hug, the promise to write, the silence that followed, the letter that declared him missing. The final word, dead. He remembered standing at a grave that held no body, only a folded flag. He remembered crying until no tears were left. And now, here Daniel sat, alive, with Emily. Michael's body shook as the piano's sorrowful notes filled the room, mocking him with every sound. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, to tear the truth out of the silence. But his voice failed him. His legs weakened. His mind spun in circles of rage and grief. Why had Emily never told him? Why had she kept this secret? Why had his brother stayed hidden while Michael's heart carried the weight of his death? The house around him seemed to close in, the walls pressing tighter, the air growing colder. He had walked through his front door expecting love. Instead, he found a secret so heavy it threatened to destroy him. And the secret was only beginning to show its face. Imagine grieving your brother for years, only to walk in and find him alive, sitting with your wife. If betrayal like this can stay hidden in one family, what's hiding in yours? Subscribe now, because some truths can destroy you if you find them too late. And if you won't subscribe, comment below why you'd rather live in denial while others see the danger coming. Michael pressed his body against the wall, his breath sharp and uneven. His eyes burned as he watched the scene inside the music room. His wife, Emily, sat at the piano with tears rolling down her cheeks. Beside her was his brother, Daniel, the same brother who had been declared dead nearly a decade ago. Michael's heart thundered, pounding against his ribs so loudly he thought it might give him away. The shock was so heavy he could hardly stand. Every part of him wanted to rush forward, to demand answers, to shake both Emily and Daniel until they told him the truth. But his legs stayed frozen. Daniel's voice filled the room, low and steady, but with a tremor that revealed pain buried under every word. They told us the mission was simple, he began, his eyes fixed on the piano keys, though his hand stayed over Emily's. We were supposed to secure a location, in and out, but nothing is simple in Afghanistan. Michael's skin prickled. That word, Afghanistan, was a ghost that had haunted his family for years. It was the place that had taken Daniel away, the place that had left Michael standing beside a coffin that held no body. Daniel's voice grew heavier, each word like a stone dropped into silence. We were ambushed. It wasn't random. It was planned. They knew we were coming. Somebody gave us up. His jaw clenched, and his eyes narrowed with memories too dark to speak of. We lost men. Good men. The kind you never forget. Emily sniffled, her shoulders shaking. Her tears fell not with surprise, but with the sadness of someone who had already heard this story before. Michael's stomach turned. How many times had Emily sat here, listening to words that he, as Daniel's brother, had been denied? Daniel took a long breath and continued. After the third ambush, they stopped sending rescue. They said it was hopeless, said no one could survive, but I wasn't dead. I was captured. The word captured echoed like thunder in Michael's mind. Captured, not killed, not buried under rubble, alive, trapped, suffering while the world told his family to mourn. Daniel's voice cracked, but he pushed on. Days blurred into months. I lost track of time. They wanted information, but there was nothing I could give them. Every sunrise felt like it might be my last. I thought of home, of Raleigh, of you, Emily. It was the only thing that kept me alive. Michael's knees weakened. His brother's words pierced him like knives. He remembered the night he had hugged Daniel goodbye. It had been in the driveway, under the yellow glow of the porch light. Daniel's uniform was crisp, his boots polished, his eyes full of fire. "I'll be back before you know it," Daniel had said, clapping Michael on the shoulder with that easy grin. But he had never come back. Instead, months later, Michael had received the dreaded call. Missing in action. Then the flag folded neatly into his mother's shaking hands. Then the funeral, where they buried not a body, but a box filled with sand and silence. Michael had stood there, holding back sobs, trying to be strong. Emily had clung to him, crying into his chest. And all the while, Daniel had been alive, alive in chains, alive in pain, alive in ways no one had told Michael. Daniel's voice pulled him back from the memory. Years passed. I stopped counting after a while. My body grew weaker. I thought it would end there, in some forgotten place, far from the world I knew. He paused, his hand tightening over Emily's. But I escaped. Not because they let me. Not because the mission was over. I escaped because I refused to die in silence. I walked for days, through sand, through mountains, through pain I can't describe. And when I thought I would collapse for good, I made it out. Somehow, I made it out. Michael's throat burned. His chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. He wanted to feel relief that Daniel was alive. He wanted to feel joy, but all he felt was betrayal. Betrayal by Emily, who sat there knowing the truth while he lived in ignorance. Betrayal by the military, who had sealed his brother's fate in papers stamped with finality, while reality had been different. Betrayal by Daniel, who had stayed hidden, leaving Michael to grieve, to carry the weight of loss that was never real. Michael's fists clenched so tight, his nails dug into his palms. The storm in his chest built higher with every second. And then he saw it. On the piano, next to Daniel's arm, lay an envelope. Thick, sealed, its edges stiff, its surface stamped with red letters that screamed louder than any words Daniel could speak. Classified. Michael's heart lurched. That envelope wasn't just paper. It was truth, sealed tight. It was answers locked away. Inside those folds lay the missing years, the names of those who betrayed him, the reason Daniel had been written off. His body trembled. His eyes locked on it as though it were the only thing in the room. Emily noticed it too. She glanced at it with fear in her eyes, then quickly looked away, as though even staring at it too long would bring danger. Daniel reached for it, his fingers brushing the surface gently, almost protectively. He picked it up, holding it close to his chest. Michael's breath caught. He leaned forward, his body screaming for Daniel to open it. The weight of silence pressed harder, every second stretching into eternity. But Daniel did not open it. His jaw tightened, and his eyes grew dark. He slipped the envelope into his jacket, the motion slow and final. "Not now," he said softly. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled. Not in front of him. Michael froze. Daniel knew. Daniel had felt his presence, had known he was standing there all along. And yet, instead of opening the envelope, instead of tearing down the wall of lies, he shut it away. Michael's knees buckled. His breath came in shallow gasps. The room spun, the walls pressing closer. The weight of 8 unanswered years crushing down on him. The envelope remained sealed, and Michael's world remained broken. Daniel's survival wasn't a miracle. It was a secret stamped classified, and secrets like that don't stay buried forever. They come knocking. Subscribe now if you believe no family deserves to be kept in the dark, and if you won't, then at least explain in the comments why you'd rather let silence choke the truth. The night outside was colder than usual. The wind whispered against the windows, brushing the glass with an eerie rhythm. But Michael Harrington was not thinking of the weather. His mind was trapped in a storm of its own. He had seen his brother, Daniel, alive, breathing, sitting at the piano. He had listened to stories of captivity and escape. He had watched Emily, his wife, weep as though she had already known these stories long before tonight. And now, sitting in the dim light of the living room, Michael could not rest. His body trembled, not from fatigue, but from the heavy weight of betrayal and unanswered questions. He rubbed his eyes, trying to clear the fog of anger, but the silence of the house made everything worse. Then, through that silence, he heard it. The steady hum of an engine. He looked out the window, his breath quickening. At the far end of the street sat a black SUV. Its headlights were off, but the faint glow of the dashboard flickered. The windows were tinted, too dark to see through. It didn't move. It simply idled, its low growl vibrating in Michael's chest like a warning. Michael leaned closer to the glass, careful not to be seen. The car had been there since dusk, and now, deep into the night, it hadn't shifted an inch. His heart thudded harder. This was no accident. Someone was watching. He pulled the curtain shut. But even with the fabric drawn, the weight of those unseen eyes pressed against him. The house, once a place of comfort, now felt exposed, fragile, like glass ready to shatter. His phone buzzed suddenly, making him flinch. The screen lit up with the words, "Blocked call." Michael swallowed hard. He hesitated before answering. "Hello?" His voice was sharp, his hand trembling. Silence. Not the broken silence of a bad line, not the muffled breathing of someone unsure. This was cold, intentional silence. "Who is this?" he pressed, his voice growing louder. Nothing. Then the line went dead. Michael stared at the screen. Almost instantly it rang again. Another blocked call. He answered, and once more, only silence. The phone buzzed a third time, and a fourth, each time the same. Silent pressure, silent threat. He dropped the phone onto the couch, his pulse racing. Whoever it was, they weren't calling to talk. They were calling to remind him, "We see you." Footsteps echoed softly in the hallway. Emily appeared, her face pale, her hands clutching the frame of the doorway. "Michael," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Don't answer it anymore." He stared at her, disbelief and fury flashing in his eyes. "You know something. Tell me what's happening." Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she shook her head. "I can't. If I do, it will destroy you." His voice broke with anger. "Destroy me? Emily, look at me. I am already destroyed." Her shoulders crumpled. She turned away, unable to face him, and that silence between them cut deeper than any blade. And then Daniel entered. His presence was heavier than the night itself. He stood tall but tired, his eyes scanning the room like a soldier still on guard. "If you knew the truth, Michael," Daniel said slowly, his voice calm but firm, "they'd come for you too." Michael turned sharply. "Who? Who is they?" Daniel didn't answer. His gaze flickered toward the window, toward the SUV still idling outside. His silence told Michael everything. Whoever sat in that car was no ordinary neighbor. Michael's phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a call. It was an email. He opened it, and the words made his blood run cold. Notice of license review. His medical license, the core of his life, the one thing that gave him purpose. Without it, he was nothing more than a man with trembling hands and a broken home. Michael read the message again and again, but it didn't change. His license had been flagged. His career was suddenly under review. The timing was too sharp, too cruel. This was no coincidence. His stomach knotted. He looked at Daniel, then Emily, his voice raw with disbelief. "They're coming after me." "Why? What does this have to do with you?" Emily covered her mouth with her hands, tears spilling over her cheeks. She didn't answer, but Daniel did. "It's because of what I brought back," Daniel said, his voice low. "It's not just me they want. It's anyone close enough to know the truth." Michael's skin prickled. His mind raced. What truth? What could possibly connect my medical license to Daniel's survival? And then the plot twist struck him like lightning. Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper. Not the classified envelope, something smaller. He placed it on the table with trembling hands. Michael leaned forward. His heart thudded as he read the words scrawled across the paper. It wasn't a military document. It wasn't about war. It was a medical file. His name was on it, Dr. Michael Harrington. The date was recent. Too recent. Daniel's voice cracked. "They were using you, Michael. While I was gone, while you thought I was dead, they were watching you. Every surgery you performed, every patient you touched, they tracked it. You don't even know how deep this goes." Michael's blood ran cold. His own work, the thing he thought was pure, the thing that had saved countless lives, was tied to something he didn't understand. Emily sobbed, collapsing into the chair. "I didn't want you to find out like this," she cried. "I was trying to protect you." Michael's head spun. His medical license wasn't flagged because of a mistake. It wasn't flagged because of bad luck. It was flagged because he was part of something larger, something connected to Daniel's missing years. The black SUV outside hummed louder as though it sensed the truth spilling through the walls. Michael pressed his hands to his head, his body trembling. Betrayal, fear, and confusion tore through him all at once. Daniel looked at him with eyes heavy with guilt. "If you open that envelope," he said quietly, "you'll never have your life back. But if you don't, they'll take it from you anyway." Michael's breath caught. He turned toward the hall where the envelope lay hidden, sealed and stamped with the word classified. And then the front porch creaked. Michael froze. Emily gasped. Daniel's hand went to his pocket. Someone was already at the door. A black SUV parked outside. Calls with no voice on the other end. Michael's medical license suddenly flagged. That wasn't paranoia. That was the system tightening its grip. If you think you'd notice before they come for you, you're already wrong. Subscribe now, before the Watchers find a way into your life. Or, if you won't, confess in the comments why you choose to ignore the footsteps outside your own door. Michael could not rest. Sleep had abandoned him long ago. His house no longer felt like home. It was a stranger wearing familiar walls. Emily moved through it like a shadow, speaking less, glancing over her shoulder, clutching her phone as if it were life itself. At first, he told himself it was fear. She had seen too much. Daniel's sudden return, the black SUV waiting outside, the blocked calls. Of course she was shaken. Any woman would be. But the longer Michael watched her, the more he saw something else, something colder. Emily avoided his eyes. She silenced her phone before he could hear it ring. She checked the window as though expecting a visitor. At dinner, her fork paused mid-air as if her mind was miles away. Michael's chest tightened with suspicion. She was hiding something. He could feel it. The same way he had once felt a patient slipping away on the operating table, life draining second by second. He could feel the truth bleeding out of his marriage. Then came the night it all broke open. The clock ticked past 11. Michael sat in the living room, pretending to read a journal, his eyes scanning the same paragraph again and again without meaning. And then he heard it, the faintest creak of the front door. His heart thudded. He rose quietly, moving to the window. There she was, Emily, slipping into the night. She moved fast, her coat drawn tight, her steps careful, as though she didn't want to wake him. Michael's jaw clenched. He waited until she was down the street before grabbing his keys. Moments later, he was in his car, headlights off, following at a careful distance. The roads were empty, silent but for the hum of his engine. Emily's car moved steadily ahead, her taillights glowing like two red eyes in the dark. Michael gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles whitened. His chest burned with anger and dread. She wasn't wandering. She wasn't lost. She was driving with purpose, and Michael was about to find out why. Emily's car turned off the main road, heading toward the edge of town. Streetlights grew sparse, the glow of the suburbs fading into long stretches of shadow. Michael's pulse quickened. He slowed his car, careful to stay 2 turns behind, his headlights dim. Finally, she pulled into a parking lot. Michael parked further down, hidden in darkness. The neon sign of a diner flickered weakly, buzzing in protest. Its once bright letters were now half dead, glowing in broken pieces. A handful of trucks were scattered across the lot, their chrome catching the dim light. Michael's eyes narrowed as Emily stepped inside. He waited, his breath shallow, his body tense with anticipation. Minutes dragged like hours, and then another car arrived. A dark sedan. A tall man stepped out. His suit was crisp, his movements sharp, practiced, too precise to belong to an ordinary man. He carried himself with the authority of someone used to control. Michael's stomach churned. He slipped from his car, keeping to the shadows, moving closer until he found a side window. The glass was streaked with grease and smudges, but it was enough. Inside, Emily sat in a booth, her posture stiff, her hands clasped tightly. She looked like a woman waiting for judgment. The man slid into the seat across from her. He didn't smile. He didn't offer greetings. He opened a folder and pushed it across the table. Michael pressed closer, straining to hear through the faint crack of the glass. "Can't keep this up forever," the man said, his voice clipped, his tone unforgiving. "He's asking questions." Emily's face crumpled with worry. "I know," she whispered. "I didn't expect him to come home early. If he hadn't—" She stopped herself, biting down on the words. Michael's chest tightened. She was talking about him, about his return. The man's eyes darkened. "You knew the risks when you agreed. We can't afford mistakes. Not after all we've covered." Emily's lip trembled. "I only wanted to protect him. He doesn't deserve to know the things Daniel went through. He doesn't deserve—" She trailed off, her voice breaking. Michael's body stiffened. Emily knew. She knew Daniel had been alive. The truth crashed down on him like a hammer. But the worst was yet to come. "Over a year," the man said flatly. "You've done well to keep him in the dark until now. Don't ruin it." Michael staggered back, his heart slamming into his ribs. Over a year. She had known for over a year. Every dinner, every kiss, every morning smile, she had carried this secret while he grieved alone. His world tilted. His breath came in sharp, shallow gasps. Emily had betrayed him. Michael's breath misted against the cold glass as he leaned closer. His heart pounded so hard it shook his chest, each beat echoing in his ears like a war drum. Inside the diner, under the harsh fluorescent light, Emily sat stiff and pale, her hands clenched in her lap. The man across from her spoke with the certainty of someone who had no fear of being overheard. "The operation must remain buried," the man said. his voice low but edged with steel. He pushed the folder closer to her. If those files ever see daylight, it won't just be Daniel's record exposed. It will drag Michael into the mess, too. Michael's entire body froze. His name. He had heard his name. For a moment, the world tilted. The buzz of the neon sign outside blurred into a ringing in his ears. He pressed his palm flat to the glass, needing something solid, something real to hold onto as the ground beneath him gave way. Inside, Emily's eyes widened with terror. She leaned forward, whispering fiercely, her voice tight with panic. "No, leave him out of this. He doesn't know. He can't know. Michael has nothing to do with it." The man's expression never changed. His jaw was set, his eyes cold as stone. "That's not how this works. If he keeps pulling at threads, if he finds his way too close, we won't have a choice." Michael's pulse roared louder. The black SUV, the blocked calls, the sudden review of his medical license. This wasn't random harassment. This wasn't bad luck. He was entangled in something far bigger than his marriage, bigger than Daniel's disappearance. He was part of the cover-up, whether he wanted to be or not. Rage clawed up his throat, so sharp it made his vision blur. Emily hadn't just betrayed him as a wife. She had betrayed him as a partner in life. She had known Daniel was alive for over a year. She had kept it secret, whispering truths to strangers while lying to the man she promised to honor. And worse still, she had helped bury his name inside a darkness he didn't even know existed. Michael's knees weakened. His hands trembled against the glass, sweat beading on his forehead. He wanted to crash through the door, to drag her away, to scream at her until the whole diner shook. But his body locked in place, chained by disbelief. And then, as if the night had not yet cut him deep enough, Emily lifted her eyes. Slowly, her tear-stained face turned toward the window. Her gaze sliced through the shadows. Her lips parted, her breath stilled. She was looking directly at him. Michael's chest caved, his body stiffened. His heart hammered against his ribs like it wanted to escape. She had seen him. Michael followed his wife, hoping for answers. What he found was worse. Emily had known his brother was alive all along, and she was part of the cover-up. Betrayal this deep can happen in any marriage, in any home. Subscribe now, because the people closest to you might not be who you think. If you won't subscribe, then tell us in the comments why you'd rather defend betrayal than confront it. The night dragged on like a wound that refused to close. The air inside the house was thick, the kind of air that clung to skin and refused to let go. Michael sat in the living room, his fists clenched on his knees, his mind circling in a storm he could not escape. The walls felt narrower than before, the silence heavier, and across from him stood the two people he should have trusted most, his wife and his brother. Daniel stood with his back straight, his expression caught between weariness and defiance. He looked like a soldier still, though his body bore the marks of years away. Emily sat in the corner, her face pale, her eyes red from crying, her hands twisting nervously as though she wanted to disappear into the fabric of the chair. Michael's chest burned with a rage so hot it was almost blinding. He wanted to scream, to tear the truth out of their mouths, but his throat was locked tight. Every time his eyes landed on Daniel, the years of grief boiled up again. The funeral without a body, the folded flag, the endless nights where he mourned alone. And every time his gaze shifted to Emily, his heart tore open in a different way. She had been his comfort during those years. She had been his anchor. And now, she was the knife. He pressed his hands against his head, trying to keep the fury from spilling out, but memories came instead. They rushed at him, vivid and sharp, dragging him back to a time before everything had rotted. North Carolina summers, the air thick with heat, the cicadas screaming in the trees. He and Daniel had been boys then, running barefoot through the red dirt behind their house. Daniel always ran faster. Michael always tried harder. They had been inseparable and yet locked in a rivalry that only brothers could understand. He remembered Daniel's laugh, high and bright, echoing across the fields as he outran him toward the creek. He remembered the sting of losing, but also the warmth of Daniel's hand pulling him up when he tripped. They had been brothers in every way, teammates, enemies, protectors, rivals. The years blurred into flashes, basketball games in the driveway, the ball bouncing against cracked pavement, arguments over who would take the last soda from the fridge, whispered secrets in the dark when storms rattled the windows and neither could sleep. And then, the day Daniel enlisted. Michael had been proud and furious all at once. Proud of his brother's courage, furious that he would leave. Their mother had cried. Their father had shaken Daniel's hand. Michael had hugged him too tightly, too desperately, trying to memorize his brother's face before it vanished. "I'll be back before you know it," Daniel had promised, with that same grin that always won people over. But he never came back. Not until now. Michael blinked hard, the memory fading, his chest aching with the weight of it. He stared at Daniel across the room, his voice breaking when he finally spoke. "Do you know what it was like?" His words cracked through the silence. "Do you have any idea what it felt like to bury an empty coffin? To stand there and listen to them say you were gone, knowing there was nothing left but dust and a folded flag? I lost you, Daniel. I lost my brother. And all this time, you were alive." Daniel's jaw tightened. His hands flexed at his sides, but his voice was steady. "I didn't choose it, Michael. I was left there, written off, forgotten. I had no way to reach you, no way to tell you." Michael rose to his feet, his body trembling. He pointed at Emily, his voice sharp with accusation. "But she knew. She knew for more than a year. She sat beside me, night after night, letting me grieve, letting me believe you were gone while she carried your secret." His voice cracked into a shout. "How could you do that, Emily? How could you?" Emily sobbed, her hands shaking as she lifted her face. "Because I didn't know what else to do." Her voice was broken, desperate. "You were never home, Michael. You were always at the hospital, always with your patients, always married to your work. I was alone. I didn't want to be. And then," she swallowed hard, tears spilling. "And then Daniel came back, broken, lost. He needed me. I didn't mean to keep it from you, but I couldn't tell you. I couldn't lose you both." Michael staggered, as though her words had struck him. His vision blurred, his chest hollowing out. Rage flared. But beneath it was heartbreak so deep it left him breathless. He had given everything to his work, yes. He had believed he was building a future for them, a life worth something. And in that space, in that absence, Emily had reached for his brother. His voice shook. "You leaned on him when you should have leaned on me." Emily's shoulders collapsed, her head dropping. She whispered, "I didn't know how anymore." Michael turned to Daniel, his voice raw with fury. "And you, my brother, you let this happen. You let her carry your secret, let her betray me every single day. How could you do this to me after everything?" Daniel's eyes darkened, his face hard as stone. But when he spoke, his voice was low, almost pleading. "Because this is bigger than us, Michael. Bigger than you, bigger than me, bigger than Emily. You think this is just betrayal, but it's not. It's survival. If you knew the truth, if you saw what I've seen, you'd understand why we can't go back." Michael's breath caught. He shook his head violently, unwilling to accept it. But Daniel stepped closer, his gaze steady, unflinching. "This is bigger than us," Daniel repeated, each word sharp as a blade. The house seemed to close in around them, the air thick, the silence deep. Michael's heart pounded, torn between rage and despair, trust and betrayal. He wanted to scream. He wanted to break. He wanted the truth, no matter how much it burned. And in that moment, staring at his brother and his wife, he realized his life was no longer his own. It belonged to whatever darkness Daniel had brought back with him. Childhood memories shattered. A wife confessing she leaned on his brother when Michael was gone. Rage and heartbreak colliding in the same breath. This is what silence and distance breed. Betrayal. Subscribe now, because ignoring the cracks in your life will only make the collapse worse. And if you won't, comment below and tell us why you'd rather protect the lie than face the truth. The envelope lay on the table like a wound no one wanted to touch. It had been there for days, sealed and stamped with the red word classified, its edges stiff and its weight heavier than paper should allow. Michael's eyes returned to it again and again, each glance filling him with both fear and fury. The envelope had answers, but it also carried the power to destroy. Daniel had guarded it with his life, refusing to let it open in Michael's presence. Emily's eyes had always darted toward it nervously, as if she feared its contents more than she feared losing her husband. But the night could not hold back its truth forever. Michael stood with his arms crossed, his chest heaving, his face drawn in anger. "Open it!" he demanded, his voice tight. Daniel's jaw flexed. His hands trembled slightly. But he reached into his jacket and pulled the envelope free. He stared at it for a long moment, his expression heavy with resignation. Then, slowly, he tore the seal. The sound of ripping paper echoed in the silence of the house. Michael felt his throat tighten, his palms sweat, his heart pound as Daniel unfolded the documents inside. Pages slid across the table, stamped with military insignia, filled with blacked-out lines, coded words, and reports written with cold detachment. Michael grabbed one of the sheets, his eyes scanning the lines, each word hitting him like a hammer. Operation Iron Winter, a covert mission. A containment strategy, a failure. And then he saw it, a line so sharp it nearly blinded him. Personnel, Harrington, Daniel, status, expendable. Michael's breath caught. His eyes widened, his stomach twisting violently. "Expendable," he whispered, his voice hollow. His brother had not been lost. He had been abandoned, deliberately, written off by the very command that sent him into the fire. Daniel's face was hard, but his eyes carried pain so deep Michael could barely stand to meet them. "Now you see," Daniel said quietly. "They didn't lose me. They left me. They used me until I wasn't useful anymore. And then I was expendable." Michael staggered back, his hand clutching the back of a chair for balance. He wanted to scream, to tear the papers apart, to burn them, to erase the word from existence. But the truth sat heavy in his hands. His brother had been sacrificed, and his family had been told to bury a coffin filled with nothing but lies. His eyes drifted to another document, this one smaller, thinner, stamped with dates far more recent. He read the words quickly, his chest tightening with every line. And then the truth hit him like a blow. Emily's name, his wife's name, typed in neat black letters. Not as a soldier, not as a casualty, but as a contact. Michael's knees threatened to buckle. He read the words again, his mouth dry, his body trembling. Emily Harrington, civilian liaison, recruited to monitor the activities of Dr. Michael Harrington following the confirmed reappearance of Daniel Harrington. The paper slipped from his fingers and drifted to the floor. He stared at Emily, his eyes wide, his voice breaking. "You were watching me," Emily sobbed, her hands covering her face. "I didn't want to. They came to me. They said it was the only way to protect you. If I didn't agree, they would—" She broke off, her voice cracking under the weight of the confession. "I thought I was keeping you safe." Michael's hands shook violently, his marriage, his trust, his entire life. It had all been entangled in a web spun by people he had never met, people who saw his family not as flesh and blood but as pawns. Daniel slammed his hand on the table, his voice fierce. Do you understand now? This isn't just betrayal between us. This is a system built on betrayal. They used her. They used me. And now they're using you. Michael's chest heaved. His career, his patience, his hospital, the reputation he had built with sweat and sacrifice, it all felt fragile now, tainted, like a life built on sand. He had thought himself a healer, a man who saved lives, but the truth told another story. He was part of an operation he had never even known existed. The weight of it all pressed down on him until he could hardly breathe. He wanted to rage at Emily, to collapse into grief, to demand Daniel fix the unfixable. But above all, he felt the crushing truth. He was powerless. Emily reached for him, her voice pleading. Michael, please. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted this. But if I didn't play along, they would have destroyed you long ago. Michael pulled back, his eyes dark, with both fury and sorrow. He didn't know whether to curse her or hold her, whether to scream or fall silent. His world was spinning, unraveling in every direction. The house was thick with silence, the documents spread across the table like wounds torn open, and then, cutting through it all, came a sound, the low, steady hum of an engine. Michael's blood ran cold. He turned slowly toward the window. The SUV was back, black, idling at the curb. Its engine growled softly, a predator waiting outside the door. Michael's pulse thundered as the headlights flicked on, spilling white light across the street. The doors opened. Men in dark suits stepped out, their faces hidden in shadow, and they were walking toward the house. The envelope finally opened. Daniel listed as expendable. Emily recruited to spy on Michael. His entire life reduced to a pawn in someone else's game. If they can erase one man like this, they can erase anyone. Subscribe now, because the files are never really closed. And if you won't, write in the comments why you'd rather stay silent while the system decides who's expendable next. The silence after the documents was broken by the low growl of the SUV outside. Michael's skin prickled as he heard the doors slam, one after another, each sound sharp in the night. He moved slowly toward the window, his breath shallow, his body tense with dread. Under the pale streetlight, men in suits stepped out, their movements controlled, their faces hidden in shadow. They didn't speak. They didn't hesitate. They walked with the kind of precision that came from years of practice. They were not neighbors, not visitors, not curious strangers. They were coming for something or someone. Emily rose from her chair with a sharp gasp, her hands clutching at the air as though she could hold the house together with nothing but fear. Daniel's body shifted instantly, his shoulders square, his stance the same one Michael remembered from his brother's old photographs in uniform. Even after years in captivity, the soldier in him lived, sharp and coiled. Michael's throat tightened. His brother was ready to fight. His wife was trembling like glass. And he himself was trapped between them, the ordinary man suddenly pushed into the storm. The knock never came. The door shook instead with a thunderous kick, splintering wood and snapping the lock like a twig. The sound roared through the house, jolting Michael's body into motion. He grabbed Emily and pulled her behind him, his body instinctively moving to shield her. Daniel lunged forward with a growl that didn't sound entirely human, grabbing the first man through the door and slamming him against the wall. The hallway filled with shadows. Boots thundered against the floorboards. Flashlights cut across the room in sharp beams, slicing through the dark. Michael's eyes adjusted just in time to see Daniel swing, his fist colliding with one agent's jaw. The crack echoed. Another man rushed him from behind, and Daniel spun, his movements fluid, his fury raw. Michael barely had time to register it before another figure came for him. He shoved Emily aside, his heart pounding, his fists clenched, though he hadn't thrown a punch in years. The man was fast, too fast, but Michael ducked and shoved, the weight of his own panic giving him strength. They tumbled into the coffee table, the wood snapping under the force, glass scattering across the rug. The whiskey bottle toppled, spilling liquid that caught the beam of a flashlight for a second before vanishing into the shadows. Emily screamed, her voice high and panicked. Michael twisted, kicking, struggling to keep the agent from pinning him. Daniel was still fighting, but more were pouring in. He saw his brother slam one man into the wall so hard, a picture frame shattered, shards scattering like rain. He saw another swing a baton, only for Daniel to twist and snap it in half with his bare hands. But for everyone he took down, another appeared. They moved with the precision of wolves, silent, merciless, without hesitation. One caught Daniel's arm, twisting it behind his back. Another pressed a weapon against his ribs. Daniel snarled, thrashing, his muscles straining against the hold, his face red with effort. For the first time, Michael saw fear flicker in his brother's eyes just for a second. Michael's chest heaved as the choice slammed into him. He looked at Emily, cowering in the corner, tears streaming down her face, her body shaking. He looked at Daniel, his brother, the man he had mourned, the boy who had once raced him through the North Carolina fields, now caught, now about to be dragged into the dark again. Save his wife. Save his brother. The world collapsed into that one heartbeat. Michael lunged. His body hit the agents like a hammer, his fists slamming into ribs, his voice tearing from his throat in a roar of fury. Emily screamed his name, her hands clutching at the air, but Michael didn't hear. He only knew the weight of his brother's arm, the sound of Daniel's grunt as Michael tore one man off him, the flash of fury in the eyes of the second before Michael slammed him into the wall. Chaos exploded, gunshots cracked, deafening in the close space. The sound tore through Michael's ears, sharp and final, rattling the windows. Glass shattered as bullets ripped through picture frames, sending shards across the floor. Emily shrieked and ducked low, covering her head with her arms. Michael's heart lurched, his eyes darting to her just long enough to see she was alive, then back to the fight. Daniel twisted free, slamming his elbow into one man's face. Blood sprayed against the wall. Another lunged at him, and Daniel grabbed the broken leg of the coffee table, swinging it like a weapon, the wood splintering across the man's shoulder. Michael felt his own fists tear skin, felt the sting of pain in his knuckles, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Every strike was fueled by 8 years of grief, a lifetime of betrayal, the rage of a man who had lost everything and found it poisoned when it returned. Then the lights flickered. Once. Twice. The hum of electricity strained. And the house went black. Darkness swallowed everything. The only sounds were ragged breaths, fists colliding, bodies thudding against walls. Michael's vision blurred in the dark, but his instincts guided him. He ducked as something whooshed past his head, swung blindly, felt his fist connect with flesh. Someone cried out. He stumbled across shattered glass, his feet slipping, cutting against the shards. Emily whimpered somewhere to his left, her voice faint, trembling. Daniel grunted to his right. The sound of his body colliding with another's filling the blackness. The room had become a storm without sight, only sound and touch. Michael's chest ached, his lungs burning, his arms heavy. He swung again, felt nothing but air, then pain as a fist struck his jaw, snapping his head to the side. He staggered, nearly falling, but pushed forward, slamming his shoulder into someone's chest. They fell together, rolling across the rug, fists striking wildly in the dark. And then, silence. The kind of silence that felt wrong, the kind that felt staged. The kind that stretched long enough for dread to crawl up Michael's spine. He froze, his chest heaving, his fists clenched. He heard Emily's sobs, quiet and broken. He heard Daniel's ragged breathing. But the other sounds were gone. Then, faintly at first, came the wail. Sirens. distant, growing louder, cutting through the night like a blade. Michael's heart pounded as he stood in the dark, glass crunching under his feet, blood warm on his knuckles. He turned toward the window, his body trembling with both exhaustion and fear. The sirens were close now, swelling, filling the night. He looked at Emily, curled against the wall, her face streaked with tears. He looked at Daniel, hunched, bloodied, his eyes fierce even in the dark, and Michael realized the fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. Agents stormed the house, glass shattered, gunshots fired. In the dark, Michael had to choose between saving his wife or saving his brother. That choice could come for anyone, any day, in ways you'll never see coming. Subscribe now, before silence forces you to make a choice you can't undo. If you won't, then tell the world in the comments why you'd rather gamble with fate. The house reeked of smoke, sweat, and broken glass. Sirens had torn through the night, closer and closer, their wail filling every corner until the street outside bloomed with red and blue light. And then, almost as suddenly as they had come, the sound was gone. The flashing lights retreated. The neighbors who had peeked through curtains closed them again. Silence returned, thick and heavy. But it was not peace. It was the silence that comes after chaos, the silence of something broken that cannot be fixed. Michael stood in the wreckage of his living room. His chest rose and fell in ragged waves, his fists still trembling, his body coated in sweat and blood. The furniture lay shattered. Glass sparkled across the floor like cruel diamonds, and the front door hung half-broken on its hinges. Emily was curled against the wall, her face streaked with tears, her arms wrapped around herself as though she could make her body smaller and safer. Daniel stood in the shadows, his face bruised, his eyes still sharp, still alive, still hunted. For a long time, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint tick of the broken clock on the wall and Emily's shallow sobs. Michael's mind was blank and burning all at once. He had fought, he had bled, he had chosen, but none of it felt like victory. The enemy had left, but only because they wanted to. They would be back, and when they returned, Michael knew they would not leave without taking something with them. Daniel moved first. He stepped toward the door, his body stiff, his breaths rough. His hand reached for the shattered frame, his eyes fixed on the night beyond. "Where are you going?" Michael's voice cracked, hoarse from shouting, raw from the fight. Daniel paused. His back still turned. "They'll come again," he said, his tone low and certain. "And if I'm here, you'll never be safe." Michael staggered forward. His chest ached, his fists clenched. "You can't just vanish again. Not after this. Not after everything." Daniel turned his head slightly, enough for Michael to see his profile, the line of his jaw, the shadow of blood at his temple. His eyes were dark, unreadable, carrying years of pain Michael would never fully understand. "You'll survive without me," Daniel said softly. "You always have." The words struck like a knife. Michael's chest heaved, his throat tight. But he could not find an answer before Daniel stepped through the broken door and into the night. His figure vanished quickly into the shadows, swallowed by the dark street until there was nothing left but emptiness. Michael stood frozen, staring at the doorway. His brother was alive, but gone again. Alive, but hunted. Alive, but unreachable. He had lost him once to war, and now again to secrets. And this time, Michael feared he would never come back. Emily's voice broke the silence. "Michael." Her tone was fragile, trembling, filled with a kind of desperation that dug under his skin. He turned to her slowly, his eyes hard, his chest hollow. She crawled forward on trembling hands, her face blotched with tears, her body shaking as she reached for him. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you." Her hands clutched at his arm, her fingers desperate, clinging. "I only wanted to protect you, please. Please forgive me." Michael looked down at her, the woman he had loved, the woman who had been his anchor, his home. He saw her face wet with tears, her eyes wide with guilt, her body broken with regret. But inside himself, he felt only emptiness. The betrayal was too deep, the wounds too fresh, the silence too heavy. His lips parted, but no words came. He could not answer. He pulled his arm from her grasp and stepped back. Emily sobbed harder, folding in on herself, her voice breaking into the wreckage of the house. "Please," she begged again, but the silence between them was louder than her cries. Michael turned away. His eyes landed on the table, on the scattered documents that had spilled from the envelope. His breath caught. The papers were there, strewn across the wood and floor, stained with sweat and blood. But the envelope itself lay empty. His heart stopped. His hands shook as he picked it up, staring into its hollow shell. The envelope that had once carried the truth, the envelope that had held the answers to 8 years of lies, was now nothing more than paper. The documents were real, yes, but something was missing. Something Daniel had taken when he left. Something that still held secrets deeper than any of them had seen tonight. Michael's chest ached as he lowered himself into the chair. Around him, the house lay in ruins. His wife wept quietly, his brother had vanished into the night, and he sat staring at the empty envelope as though it could speak. But it did not. It only mocked him with silence. And in that silence, Michael realized the truth. He was not free. His life, his marriage, his career, his family, none of it was his anymore. It belonged to the darkness Daniel had dragged home. It belonged to secrets buried in classified files, secrets so deep they had swallowed his brother and might now swallow him. His eyes burned with tears he refused to let fall. He pressed the envelope flat on the table, his fingers trembling. He had survived the night, but survival no longer felt like victory. It felt like waiting for the next door to break, the next shadow to step in, the next truth to cut him open. The house hummed with silence. Emily wept softly in the corner, but Michael did not move. He only stared. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the broken door, he thought he heard footsteps. Not Daniel's, not neighbors, something else. He closed his eyes, his heart pounding, his breath shallow. If your brother returned from the dead, he thought, would you let him back into your life? Or would you lock the door forever? The silence did not answer. Daniel vanished back into the night. Emily begged for forgiveness, and Michael was left in the ruins of his family staring at an empty envelope. But the truth isn't gone. It's still out there, darker and closer than anyone wants to admit. Subscribe now, because this ending is only the beginning. And if you won't, then confess in the comments why you'd rather be silent while the darkness spreads.